just moved to the Chicago area, played a couple of our events, been known to play a lot of Legacy, has an Eternal Weekend top 8 and a Legacy Pit top 8. Just this past year playing Tempo Doomsday, but playing Golgari Control right now.
Yeah, really, really excited to see Samantha show her range and just understanding of the Legacy format. Obviously, you don't get finishes like the ones she has without that. And on the other side of the table here, perhaps one of the more dangerous things to go up against playing something like Golgari Control, we have the Epic Storm. A blisteringly fast mana Storm combo deck. Kind of the kind of deck you wish you had Force of Will against. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Samantha normally doesn't leave home without her Force of Wills and Baleful Strixes, but today she's branching out of her comfort zone a little bit, and like you said, showing her range, being like, hey, I'm more than just a Brainstorm girl. I also have access to these creature toolbox decks, and both players are 1-0.
Yeah, it looks like we have both players thinking about their opening hands here. I don't know how much Storm you've ever played, Mason, but it's a lot of staring at your opening 7 and being like, what can I do? As David Becker looks like he's decided to keep. Same with Samantha. And what is it that he can do?
Looks like we have an Urza's Bauble to start things off.
It looks like Urza's Bauble and Bloodstained Mire. And that's going to be all for our turn 1. I believe this is an...
Yeah, maybe this is an upkeep.
Main phase. It sounded like an upkeep based on the way that they were motioning about it. But
yeah, I think so. As Elvish Reclaimer is revealed, David may be unsure if Samantha has any discard spells. David might also know Samantha. She played well in our event, done really well in Legacy. If you're invested, you know her. She sort of wrote the book when it comes to Tempo Doomsday. So David might be trying to play around Thoughtseize. Just be like, this Samantha girl plays Thoughtseizes a lot. I don't want to get got. And then plays around it in that way here. And if you're Samantha, you'd love to see the Urza's Bauble at first because, that might harken to something like 8-cast, which is a great matchup. Instead, this Storm deck can be a little bit of a troublesome one. You have a couple utility creatures like Collector Oof that can do some really impactful things. But besides that, you're kind of lacking when it comes to big things to do in this matchup, at least in game 1.
Yeah, and Samantha starting out with, the ideal start for her here, which is just going and casting Green Sun Zenith for a Dryad Arbor, getting ahead on mana to be able to use, some of the clunkier things in Magic like creatures to start to control the game. And establish her board presence here as we see David draw that card for the Bauble as well as a card for turn. Going to sack this Bloodstained Mire. And we're going to see where his turn is going. Typically, you think of the Storm deck as, I know some people think of it as, I'm just going to dump my whole hand on the first turn, or I've got to cast all these cantrips, and it really can be either. So seeing what kind of hand David has here and how this game develops is going to be really crucial to the way the rest of this goes.
Yeah, and, this is the Epic Storm variant of the deck, so it's a little different than traditional Storm, and so you're going to be open to a little bit of different hate than you might normally be. But we're going to see how David sort of interacts around that from Samantha, because Samantha, that turn when Green Sun Zenith at the Dryad Arbor actually puts you pretty far ahead in your mana development in a way that these Storm decks, aren't always used to players being that far ahead on mana.
Yeah, and David now now he knows what it is he's up against. There's only one deck that really opens on Bayou into Green Sun Zenith for the Dryad Arbor, has Elvish Reclaimer. So brainstorming here to maybe see if this is a position where he's going to be able to go for something big or, just find the kind of hand he needs. But for him, it's going to be about going faster than Samantha can get the game under her control, as we're seeing another fetch here, shuffling away that Brainstorm for a Badlands.
Speaking of Badlands, just a little off topic. Did you see David's shirt? It says Baja Blastoise. Kind of a banger shirt.
That is a really good shirt, actually.
Sorry, you said Badlands. My brain just realized what his shirt said, and I was like,
Oh, and we're getting the lands out. It is time to count some mana. So we're going to see some fireworks here potentially from David Becker's Storm deck. And the real differentiating thing, I feel like we haven't said it yet about the Epic Storm, Mason. Do you know what the differentiating thing is between the Epic Storm and more the traditional Storm variants?
Help me out for at home. I feel like
it's all the artifacts. So we saw Urza's Bauble, it's got Mishra's Bauble, and it uses Mox Opal in addition to its Lotus Petals, Lion's Eye Diamonds, to be able to get more of that mana filtration and an additional ritual. So it's a lot faster and leaner on mana sources, as we've seen David here play some Lotus Petals, Rite of Flame, a Dark Ritual, and is now casting Ad Nauseam from 18, having played a land. It looks like the storm count is 6, and we are seeing just how far David can get with that one singular Lotus Petal. That's going to be his access to mana to start. So, as we see some Mox Opals come over here, some rituals, we see a Burning Wish and an Infernal Tutor. So having access to those payoffs with that Lion's Eye Diamond as well, really just trying to see how, if possible, he can just end the game here by getting a Tendrils with Storm. I don't know, Mason, if you see something in that pile, if you can see the line there.
Yeah, I don't see the exact kill. I think we do have it for the most part, just looking at this here, because I believe we can get up to the requisite storm count for Tendrils to kill. And I think we have like various other ways, but we can just wish for something, or we can also Galvanic Relay to just find a bunch of things and sort of go off from there.
Yeah, this actually looks like it is just going to be lethal with
Grapeshot.
the Tendrils in the sideboard. We've got enough rituals. Again, using those Mox Opals and the existing Lotus Petals to be able to get that starter mana he needs from where he was in the Ad Nauseam, casting multiple Rite of Flames, a Dark Ritual, and then that Burning Wish getting Tendrils of Agony. Storm's already 12 here. That's just going to be enough.
Yeah, and we're seeing David maybe just play some other cards first before we go for anything. Just wants to be careful. Firewall fail summer, that way we don't lose to any counter spells that might weirdly be in Samantha's deck. Obviously, we think that would have happened sooner, but just in case Samantha made a small mistake. And Tendrils of Agony is going to kill Miss Murphy.
So, you're Samantha Murphy. This game, you cast Green Sun Zenith, no other spells. What are you thinking about in the sideboard here? You've got 4 Leyline of the Void, 4 Grief, 2 Endurance, 2 Force of Vigor, an Opposition Agent, a Snuff Out, a Max Vandal. What are you reaching for immediately for Samantha? Because you got to know coming into it that these combo matchups are going to be out there.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I imagine we probably bring in our Griefs. Just having some of that discard is going to be, I think, pretty good in this matchup. And we have some bigger cards like Atraxa that aren't quite what we're looking for. So I think that's the first thing I really want. I can see a world where we may have Force of Vigor depending on their sort of sideboard cards. They're not going to really expose their artifacts till the turn they start going off. So that's probably not the exact card you want. But Samantha might have some main deck cards that aren't really what this matchup is about either, and she might look for some minor upgrades or look to get lucky. She's really looking to get something like her Collector Oof out. We saw, and how Abe mentioned as well, there's so much artifact mana in this deck. Collector Oof actually slows this down so much. So had Samantha been on the play and known, she might have been able to actually get a Collector Oof out off of Green Sun Zenith, off another one. So I think that's going to be her main thing. There isn't too much else you can do. You might see Opposition Agent come in just to try and catch fetch lands. With her on the play and the extra mana acceleration this deck provides, that is sometimes a play you'll see. And Max Vandal might also come in just as, a Rex Reclamation Sage type card to blow up an early artifact in case there's some weird situation where that needs to happen.
Yeah, and also important to note, any black card when you're bringing in 4 Grief, just like Jarvis was saying about, blue card pitching to Force of Will, black card pitching to Grief when you're in Samantha's position really does matter. From David Becker's side, we've got 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Abrupt Decay, 2 Chain of Vapor, and then looks like some Burning Wish targets in Echo of Eons, Empty the Warrens, Galvanic Relay, Grapeshot, Peer into the Abyss, Pulverize, the Tendrils we just saw win the game. What do you think is going through Becker's mind here as far as what he's trying to do to update his deck?
Yeah, so I think Abrupt Decay makes a lot of sense for Becker. Like we talked about, Collector Oof can be a little bit of a problem for this deck due to needing all the artifact mana. So Abrupt Decay is just going to remove that problem for you. But also, Samantha's deck just has creatures, and we can Abrupt Decay various little things, like maybe a Fiend Artisan that could also tutor up. All those little things will matter, and that could be something. We might also see some Chain of Vapors come in. A card that doesn't permanently answer the problem, but returns a target non-land opponent to under his hand. And then, you can sort of go back and forth. This is a card we might see as a one of being brought in, just as a way to, once again, just bounce the Collector Oof and then go for it for there. I'm curious to see if David will keep in the Veils, expecting something like Thoughtseize or Grief, maybe in a Cabal Therapy from Samantha's side, or if he'll be cutting on that card. All in all, though, he doesn't want to sideboard in too many cards because you do want to sort of stay fast. But Veil of Summer is a card that I could see maybe, David trimming a little bit on. Not sure if Samantha's going to have a bunch of griefs or have a bunch of Thoughtseize or even at all,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is you only have so many slots when your deck is this kind of hyper-focused, combo deck where you have you have to have all these artifacts to turn on your Mox Opals. How much can you really devote to interacting with the opponent or having the right hate? And Veil of Summer, good against grief, but costs a mana, kind of a big downside against cards that are free. And then you have all these other things you might want. So it'll be interesting to see what he chooses to do as we see looks like they're drawing opening hands now. So we're going to have Samantha here thinking about her opener as she's going to 6, and David now thinking about the same. So it looks like David's kept 7. So if you're Samantha, what are you thinking here, Mason? You're down a game. Your deck's full of creatures. Your opponent's got Storm. They're keeping 7. What's going through your mind? What are you looking for?
Well, as someone who played Elves for a long time in Legacy, I know that I'm looking for the cards that matter, and that's it. Golgari controls sort of, a spiritual successor to that sort of deck. You don't have your own combo kill, but Samantha has a few cards that are good, and everything else is pretty medium to bad. She is really looking to just sort of stop David and then have the miscellaneous creatures have a low fail rate and just attack David to death. So she needs to find cards that actually put Collector Oof into play. For example, Green Sun Zenith is a card we see in her hand here, and that is something that can maybe help her accelerate out a little bit, as we do have an Ignoble Hierarch as well. We have double Boseiju Ignoble with Green Sun. So we have the turn 2 Oof, but I believe we're having to Legend Rule our land away. So
are you sure it's double Boseiju? I think there's only one Boseiju in the deck, so it might be Boseiju Lair of the Hydra, the classic is my old growth troll good hand from Pioneer.
Yes, it might be that. That would make sense, as we are going to see Lair of the Hydra and a Green Sun Zenith on one. I might not have been an Ignoble Hierarch. I might have been just way off my read there. I maybe just had the hand completely wrong. But that is going to be the start of what Samantha needs, because like we talked about, she sort of needs to, oh my God, David's pulling out the mana on turn 1. If this happens, this is what happens, You can try to mulligan to a grief, but it might not even be good enough. This is also a thing where it's not deterministic that David has beat Samantha. There is some amount of there could be a fail rate with Ad Nauseam, and David's committed. I will say this is a spot where maybe Force of Vigor would have been great. Led on the Mox Opal, we could have vigored it, and it might have been game over for David. We'll have to see.
Not even sure if there's a land in David's hand, but that's something about this particular build of the Storm deck that, it has a lot of copies of Galvanic Relay. It has the Ad Nauseams. It has, it's developing Mox Opals and these artifacts that like redraw themselves. It's really a deck designed to kind of either go off once really big and end the game, or be able to kind of half go off in the way that it's going to draw 12 cards for next turn and then kill you on that turn. So, if it's the case that, that draw from David is going to leave that Collector Oof open, that's going to be, it's not over, like you said, Mason.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like David, sort of brainstormed and has hit a little bit of thinking spot, and we saw how quick David's been when the lines are clear. Clearly someone who is an expert with the Epic Storm deck. So David might be sort of having, look at the sky, makes me wonder if David maybe has a risky line available that isn't 100% the clear. And we're just going to play the Lion's Eye down and pass. I joked about maybe Force of Vigor wasn't the right card for the matchup, but it's looking pretty good right now. We
are also Brainstorm locked as David Becker here. So we know that we're drawing the right 2 cards, and we know neither of them are lands. So, Samantha, what do you think Samantha's going to get here off this Green Suns for 2? What do you think, Mason?
I think Samantha's a bit of a collector, and she loves oofs. Eldritch Reclaimer is like, hey, I just want you to know I'm here, guys. I'm going to hang out at the party. If you want to talk to me, you can, but I'll stay in the hand till then.
Yeah. Urza's Bauble really having an affinity for that card this match.
Yeah. Just
wants to know what's up. How's it going?
Yeah. Also, if you're David, things are rough when your opponent leads on the Boseiju and you have your Lion's Eye Diamond in play. It's just like, oh, you're not interested in that? Okay.
I've got no lands, and my mana sources are artifacts. What do you mean you don't want to do that? That's not enough for you?
Yeah. Samantha really showing how much fun she is at parties, saying, hey, invite me later. I love to turn off mana. It's so much fun. As you see David laugh, I think he's just passing the turn back here. We're just waiting on Samantha to finish shuffling her deck there.
Yeah, David only getting to see one new card there from that Brainstorm, and it does not appear to be a land. So, we've got some nice rocks to look at, a lot of cards in hand, and we're just going to let Samantha play her game for a bit here. Kind of pay ourselves back for that game we took all the game actions in game one.
Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the strength of these Golgari decks, is they have a lot of high-impact creatures that can take over the game, and you sort of have these like bullets that are super effective. I actually, last NRG, when we were commenting the finals with Doomwick, we were talking about the deck sort of as the green version of Death and Taxes, where you're not quite as locky-outy as Death and Taxes is, but in exchange you get some combo kills available to your deck. But you still sort of play that, hey, I'm going to limit what you can do, don't let you do too much, and use the fair creatures to sort of cross the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I've said a lot of times that this Golgari control deck and the Yawgmoth deck in Modern, if you're watching and you're like, these legacy cards are so old, I have no idea what they do. What's up with Modern? This is just Yawgmoth, but Yawgmoth is way too much mana, and we'll just do other things like Natural Order for Atraxa. And so it's the same principle. We're just putting material on the board and letting that carry the game, as we see things like Collector Roof are extremely effective sometimes.
Yep, and let's pull up Fiend Artisan. This was sort of the card that kind of changed a lot about this deck, as we do say discard Thoughtseize. This creature just lets you sort of sacrifice your creatures to find more creatures. This is just a way to sort of have redundancy in your sort of one-ofs like Collector Oof. And with your Gaia's Cradles in your deck, you can actually do things like Cradle and then find another one with your Elvish Reclaimer and sack, and then Fiend Artisan, bam, turn that Elvish Reclaimer into like a Cradle Hoof and Atraxa. And that sounds a little far-fetched, but it actually happens way more than you might think. So we're going to Green Sun for 3.
Is going to Green Suns for 3 here. Just continue to solidify her position. Looks like she's eyeing a Grist. It's kind of the, well, I have everything in the world. What could I possibly need?
I kind of like this opposition aid. Oh, I guess you can't get opposition.
You gotta get a green creature.
Yeah. She thumbed past that one. I was like, oh, maybe we should get that one. But yeah, I can't grab that one. Grist, maybe a small misstep here, not doing this first. If we do mill a creature, we missed a damage with Fiend Artisan. Hopefully it's not. Yeah, you see Samantha look at the camera. She knows that she missed the point. A little oopsie poopsie, as we called in the business. It's all right. Probably not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think both you and Samantha realized that she can't get opposition aid on Green Sun Zenith at the same exact time.
Yeah,
I think that was synced up.
Yeah, but God, it would have been really cool if we could have. It would have been really cool. A lot of opposition agents here in the NRG series recently. We had 2 of the mono black lockout deck make the top 8 of our event just 2 weekends ago in Mundaline. Lotus Petal.
David Becker getting to play permanents that don't do anything rather than discarding things you can't cast. Legacy really is just a format like no other. One of the formats of all time, if you ask me.
Yes, for sure. And it's cool that things like these 2 decks can exist, right? Like when you first tell people about Legacy, they imagine what David Becker's doing, right? They're like, oh, all that mana and all these things, you can probably kill everyone on turn 1 or 2. And the reality is that actually these fair decks actually kind of rule the day for the most part. Obviously, we do still see, and we're going to double check our Fiend Artisan just to make sure that it works exactly like we think it does. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, these fair decks actually do a really good job of keeping these unfair decks in check, especially the blue ones. Daze and Force of Will just put a lot of pressure on these decks actually. And now we can grab Opposition Agent with the Fiend Artisan. That one is not color restricted. And that's going to make it, David has to draw an actual land instead of a fetch land, which is a big difference.
Yeah, and I think it's just a really, really cool thing about, Legacy in general is that you said, the blue decks, you obviously have a lot of counter magic, doesn't cost you any mana. That makes it really easy to fight with some of these, on the stack combo decks. But you don't have to do that to be able to win games in the format. You can have no counter magic in your deck and beat a deck that is trying to just cast spells that kill you. And I think that's just a really, really awesome thing about Magic as a whole, and especially you see in Legacy, is that you can build this house of cards that pinches your opponent in all the right ways if you just have a turn or two.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to see Samantha just attack with all the creatures there. And that's going to put us into game number 3 there. We saw Samantha sort of, be on the play really mattered in that game, right? Getting that turn 2 collector oof made it so that David's deck just couldn't function, despite David trying his best actually to win on turn 1. I wonder if David was really thinking about, ooh, this is an early start. Maybe I actually have to go for it. And that's why he pulled out the cards. Less than David thought it was going to actually happen, and more of like, well, my opponent's smart, and they kept a hand that puts all this mana into play, and they use a green sun not to grab oof. Probably a bad sign.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. Like Samantha having the opportunity to be on the play there in that game, as we saw, was so big. Being able to get a mana ahead to be able to have the consistency of tutoring for that collector oof, without having it just in her opening hand, there's not a way for her to get it down faster than turn 2. And this Storm deck, like we saw, it has that potential. Who knows what that game looks like if there was a land in that Brainstorm, right? If he's able to fetch some stuff away and start casting rituals, like you don't get the lands out and start counting your Storm for no reason if you're a Storm player. You kind of know or you don't.
Yep. Yeah. And it looks like our players are just about ready. But just so you know, there are more events coming really quickly. So I'm just going to talk about our next event real quick. We're not going to go through all of them. But if you want to play some Magic after watching this, you're having fun, you want to go to Detroit August 12th through the 13th. We have a modern 10K showdown on Saturday. If you win that, you make our end of the year series championship event. That's $25,000 in prizes and a pro tour invite on the line. That's really exciting. And then Sunday we have a 5K Pioneer trial as well. These are our already invited players. We have a bunch of big names that you've seen, and then some names you probably saw for the first time yesterday as well, as Nimitz, Wise, and Bogart. They won our team event literally just about 12 hours ago, and I believe they're all playing again today. Couldn't get enough Magic. Hard to quit playing too when you're winning, Abe. You're running hot. You want to keep going. But they're going to be joining our last year champ, Roger Suleiman, and then Steven Dykeman, Weiser, and Matthew Hoey, all players we've seen a lot of on our tour. But still, lots of space available here. So if you want to join them, you can do that. And our annual leaderboard, this is about the time where you need to be making the commitment if you want to go or not, as it is possible to catch up to those top 6 slots if you have a couple, Sunday final appearances, and then, maybe you just got a little unlucky on a Saturday. You can still make our end of the year race. So these are our names of the players who are live. It's going to be very exciting to see how these last 3 events tighten up on the races. Chris Smith has a commanding lead for the top 6, but if he doesn't keep playing events, could fall behind some of these other players, as the players are finished mulliganing, it seems, here. So let's head back to the feature match area, as David did put a card back and started on 6 cards this game.
Yeah, so David now with the opportunity to be on the play has kept the 6, and we are starting off with a big think.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. A lot can happen on turn 1 in this format. Leading on the Mox Opal, then the Lotus Petal. I wonder if Samantha picked up on that from game 1 and brought in those Force of Figures. But it looks like, no, it's the same kind of start that we had last game, just leading on that Brainstorm and seeing where we lie.
Yeah, I do wonder if David's I guess no matter what, Force of Vigor is going to get you, but I guess you have to keep the Opal if you lead on Opal last, which is maybe better, but maybe getting the redraw is just better if your Opal's going to die anyways.
Yeah, the sequencing is kind of tough. It also might be that, David just played these matchups enough to know that Force of Vigor isn't really on the Golgari player's radar, As much as we talked about last round, Jarvis being a Legacy expert, all of the players here playing Legacy that you're going to see, I would assume if they're playing a deck, especially with as many foils as you see David Becker, played a match or 2.
Yeah, played a match or 2. David checking the sideboard, double checking the way maybe we boarded, also double checking maybe a wish target. Yeah, if we can do something like maybe get a ritual going in Galvanic Relay and just draw 5 or 6 cards, that could be a huge swing turn here. And David will just be set up to probably take over the game from there.
Yeah, this looks like, and it looks like we have a land to follow up this Brainstorm that we're thinking about keeping or not keeping. We talk a lot about Legacy as a format being kind of defined by Brainstorm and these decisions you make, the ability to change your hand so much with a single card. And in Storm, it's like no other. You are really, really in that. And it looks like we've pump faked.
I do like, by the way, that David David keeps the lands in Wooburg order, and that's some respect for the game I can respect as we do see Noble Hierarch in a passing of the turn.
All right, and we are thinking. So we're thinking in the upkeep about our fetch. We know our top card.
It's interesting here. David and Samantha sort of shaking her head. Feels like she maybe got away with something there. She does have 2 Gaia's Cradles in hand. If she has some more 1-drops, that's going to produce a lot of mana on the next turn.
And it looks like David is just playing a land and passing back the turn. As we're going to see a Green Suns for 2.
Yeah, and I think we might be getting our oofs again.
Yeah, what's the name of this deck? Oofs all spells?
Yeah. Ooh, gosh. Hang on, Wizards. We need to pump the power level of oofs so that can be a deck.
Yeah, I mean, what are some other... Do you know the other most famous oof, I think, in Magic?
Yeah,
like 2 or 3 out there. Huh?
Mutavault.
No, it's got to be Kitchen Finks, man.
Oh, Kitchen Finks is technically an oof from Mutavault. It's like, I'm an oof. As we do see an Abrupt Decay, by the way, on this collector oof. Big game there for David.
Yeah, David neutralizing possibly, maybe not the only card that's going to matter from Samantha, but the card that Samantha can produce that matters the most. Samantha's really going to have to just accelerate her game plan to stay in this. Whereas David, not really, right? He's had this Abrupt Decay. He cast that Brainstorm. He's got some draws coming maybe off the Urza's Bauble, but maybe we have a little bit of time. But certainly not as much as we had under the oof. Don't you agree, Mason?
I agree. Sorry. Samantha just flashed her hand of I kind of got a bit of an awkward one and just looked at the camera like it was The Office or something. And it really, the idea that Samantha is our Jim Halpert this round is very funny to me. As we are going to see the Urza Bauble cracked here. There is an Elvish Reclaimer in hand, which means we could be 3 for 3 Dave.
I would love to see that. What's the die say?
Come on.
Oh!
And it's a good one for David to have access to know, too. Now, Samantha's a little bit away, but she does have some 1-drops in hand and a second Cradle, so we might actually see a playing of the Elvish Reclaimer finally, float some mana with Cradle, play another Cradle, and then activate or cast Natural Order. And I don't think we have any more oofs in our deck, but Crater Hoof could just do a ton of damage.
Yeah, the long ooh sound is just probably bad news for David. I mean, Crater of Behemoth is a fast-moving missile. That card puts a lot of damage in the red zone and does put a real serious clock on David. Would you consider maybe if you're Samantha getting anything else there? Is Hoof really what you're thinking most about?
It depends. Samantha maybe also left in Atraxa. Atraxa might be a card I want. I was taking a look here. Orcish Bowmaster I don't think does too much outside of the cantrips.
We also still has to be a green creature, right?
Yeah, great point. Sorry about that. Not gonna lie, I was starting to sneeze and my brain melted. Yeah, I think though it is also possible that Samantha just maybe tries to put a bunch of creatures on board and save the natural order so the Hoof does more than just sort of 8-ball David. Although the 8-ball is an underrated part of the Hoof. Honestly, Crater Hoof does sort of put a big just body on the board, and this place could lead to a 2-turn clock. So Samantha's going to need to do that math, and that is something that comes up a bunch with these sort of Hoof decks where, yeah, it's nice to Hoof for exact lethal, but sometimes you just want to, get the damage going, and it's more to do it now than to wait. David pulling back it out. But I'm going to be honest, this time David looks a little stressed about everything, sort of pulled out his mana and seems to still be thinking, might feel like he's under the gun as Bauble is the first spell.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the knowledge that there's a natural order there, David could have to be thinking about a lot of things when it comes to what this turn is going to look like, because now he knows that Samantha could produce, who knows if there's a second collector oof in the deck, who knows if there's,
Archon of Valor's Reach.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could go dangerously wrong here. So it looks like David opting to spend his Burning Wish in order to cast a Galvanic Relay for just 4 cards next turn. I say just 4 cards. 4 cards next turn is a lot of cards.
Yeah, and there was all mana too, notably. So David is going to get to pop this Bauble and get an idea of what Samantha has. I think it was Lair the Hydra. And David is going to, if you can draw a payoff card, it's going to have the mana to do it. But if not, it's just going to have a bunch of mana waiting around here.
All right. It looks like Samantha's going to start here. It looks like she's thinking about an Orcish Bowmasters, which is mana neutral with that guy's Cradle. Probably thinking about how she's going to get to that natural order.
Yeah, if she plays Orcish Bowmaster, the best raise the alarm of all time, she gets to ping David, float 3 mana off the Cradle, cast a 1-drop from hand, which I believe she has in Reclaimer, then can play the second Cradle, sacrifice one of the creatures, and then attack with a big hoof.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, or even could save the natural order for a big hoof the following turn, right? When all those creatures can attack. I haven't done the math on it, but it could be the case that, you know, you want to make sure that if you're getting the hoof, it's a 2-turn clock either way, right? And so you might be able to get, right, this Fiend Artisan down. You know, maybe you could think about natural ordering for Attraction, trying to find a Grief, a little something to interact. But it looks like, yeah, she is opting to put the Fiend Artisan in play. What are your...
The Bauble's going to make David lose another life from the Orcish Bowmaster too, which this is the kind of heartbreak. Because I like what you're saying though, Abe, about like maybe we're supposed to hit for a bunch, but the Ad Nauseam kind of needs to hit a lot. We sort of need that card. So the question becomes, hey, is dealing 11 damage between the Bowmaster shot, is that enough to actually kill David, right? Because David would be down to 7, which means we only get to hit about 6 1-mana spells. Now, that won't be a huge problem. The problem might more be that we need to hit the 1-mana spells in order to find the more expensive spells.
Yeah, so the hoof is 9, 10.
It's you square the boom. It's 10. Also, if you sacrifice another creature and leave the noble, it's 11 with Exalted, and then 12 damage from the Orcish Bowmaster. So it's actually putting David to 6, which might be a huge part of the equation. Like that is literally the difference between winning and losing sometimes with that Nauseam.
Yeah, and David, you know, had this Galvanic Relay this turn, which something this deck can do really effectively is chain those Galvanic Relays, but that requires turns. That takes time. And that's something where if Samantha's denying David the opportunity to have those, and it's just the Ad Nauseam and his life total's low, you're right, Mason. That could be the option we're looking at rather than just going for the one shot next turn.
Yeah. And you see Samantha sort of counting. She's just sort of doing the mental math because there is a lot going on here. Because the Lair of the Hydra is an interesting thing to develop as well, especially with all these cradles, right? If Samantha plays the Lair this turn and then activates the Lair and the cradles, and then he goes for it again the next turn, she has a ton of damage. Looks like she is going to natural order. Looks like she wants to sacrifice the Elvish Reclaimer. Makes sense because the Fiend Artisan is bigger than that.
Yeah, it grows the Fiend Artisan. The Reclaimer is not big. A Bajuka Bog is not going to do anything for us here. And the Ignoble Hierarch, like you were saying before, does present an additional point of damage. Eyeing the Crater Hoof. Making sure this is what we want.
I like this. You can tell Samantha thought through her turn and probably has the intention of hoofing, but she also wants to double check, right? It's good to plan out your entire turn, but also in these sort of spots, especially with so much time on the clock and you're in game 3, just double check and make sure you know, like, oh, I actually played 2 oofs this weekend, right? Or I have some weird line available to me. You just want to make sure. And so with Exalted here, I believe David should be at 7, and then the Orcish Bowmaster should put David to 6, as long as we remember the trigger from the extra draw here. Trigger the bow. Grow the army.
Amass Orcs 1.
Yes. All right, what does David have? David's extending the hand, and congratulations, Samantha Murphy. We'll see if we can get an interview with her. But, wow, that was a crazy game, Abe. When David pulled out the stuff, that was crazy. I did not think it was going to play out like that. When he just turned 1, pulled out all the stuff, I was very much like, oh, no, it's just game over.
Yeah, both times showing both the potency and the potential fragility of being the Storm deck here as, you know, just firing off a Brainstorm and saying, if this Brainstorm's good, I win. Sometimes that Brainstorm, not very good, Mason. And some good, honest magic can happen as a result.
Yep. We're going to actually go to our time-shifted match here. Looks like we have enough time to maybe show all of it, so we're going to try and get you some more magic here and give these players some time to relax. We're going to have Matthew Hoey on Teamer Cascade versus Jonathan Johnson on Is It Delver. Your eyes aren't deceiving you, Twitch chat. This is the Rhinos deck. that you see a bunch of in Modern, but actually in Legacy. And this deck has some huge upgrades if you haven't been keeping around here. So basically, it's just a Stompy deck, much like before. What's happening here is the deck tries to put a turn 1 or 2 Cascade a card on the stack and then get Rhinos like and then protect it. But also can do things like turn 1 or 2 Minskin Timeless Hero, and things like that. So this deck is very explosive and actually one of the better performing aggro decks in Legacy right now.
Yeah, and Jonathan Johnson kind of posing the regular question of the format with Is It Delver, leading off on our normal friend of fetch for Volcanic Island and start doing some stuff. Unlike like we saw Jarvis in round 1 playing kind of a Grixis Delver deck with Orcish Bowmasters, not choosing to take advantage of that new addition from Lord of the Rings. As we're seeing game 1 here get underway with 2 baubles for this DRC, as we're already delirious, it looks like.
Yeah, sometimes it goes that way when you have all these baubles and fetch lands. You can just very quickly have the 3/3. Did you see Seagate Restoration, the draw for Hoey? That's a land they play in order to help maintain these Force Negations and Force of Wills blue count. Kind of a painful land in some matchups, but can be worth it.
Yeah, well, when your deck doesn't cast spells that cost 1 or 2 mana, it's either 0 or 3, a land that comes to play tap, not that big a deal, as we see a Scalding Tarn and passing the turn with Hoey's hand full of just free counter spells. It looks like that was a preordained from Jonathan Johnson, a Wasteland, and getting in for 3. Really just the exact thing Delver wants to be doing. Got our threat, got a little bit of disruption, riding it out. We're going to see how this Cascade deck can come back from being behind on board. Kind of a bit of a weakness of the strategy, if you ask me.
You're going to see Upkeep Brainstorm bends the Murktide. Surprised by the Upkeep Brainstorm there. Typically, you sort of want to take your draw first, and then, you hit a fetch land, you can shuffle away the cards you want. Maybe Jonathan sort of knowing what's going on. Maybe he just drew really quick there. I missed it. That's on me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, main phase Brainstorm, a lot more. Without a Delver of Secrets in play, the Upkeep Brainstorm doesn't tend to be a play you see a lot. But it looks like Jonathan Johnson just doing what Delver does. We're going to make our hand better. We're going to attack you for 3. We're going to wait for something to happen. And while I think Matthew Hoey will be able to win any war on the stack, getting that far might be the trouble in this game. But Rhinos, 8 power is a lot of power, and they come out quick. So see Hoey going for some lands here, likely going to fetch around this Wasteland if he has the opportunity to.
And yeah, it looks like I saw there we go. See, I thought his deck played a basic for each type, so does have what he wants in that department.
Yeah, neutralizing the Wasteland here and petty thefting or attempting to petty theft the Dragon's Rage Channeler in Jonathan Johnson's end step. That's going to resolve. Kind of stemming the bleeding here for Hoey, don't you think?
Yeah, it's sort of doing a good job of keeping the battlefield under check, give himself some time to deploy these Rhinos and sort of fight through what's going on. As we do see a bolting in and then a Cascade from Shardless Agent. Going to find Rhinos. All my opponents are so lucky. They always hit it.
Yeah, I wonder what it is that we're going to see here. Could be Living End Mason.
Yeah, it could be anything. One of my favorite errors was when Living End was sideboarding the Crashing Footfalls to sort of dodge the rest in pieces of the world. It was a good time.
The whole Cascade into suspend spells thing is probably one of my favorite old tricks that still get run. I think it's like always a good time. But Forcible taking down that Crashing Footfalls, just a Shardless Agent out of that exchange for Hoey, as his Seagate Restoration gets Wastelanded. Another Wasteland to follow, as well as a Murktide Regent.
Yeah, and Murktide Regent, it's super big in this matchup in Modern because it outsizes everything. And in that format, we have some things like Fury in our deck from Hoey's side and the Rhinos that can maybe team up to take down the Murktide. In this matchup, it's really just the Brazen Borrower's Robust from Hoey, and we already used one of those. Now, we are playing 4 because we want to have that high blue count for our Force Negations and Force of Wills, but it is sort of a tall order to actually answer this Murktide long term.
Yeah, Hoey looks like he's just still missing that third mana source. Might this Fire Ice get cycled to gain some life here effectively by getting that Murktide out of combat, which is what we see as the Delver flips to a Spell Pierce, which is another big problem for Hoey, who is just he's falling behind on board, and this game has gone on a little too long. As Hoey takes that draw step and sees that he agrees with that. This game has gone on too long. He is too far behind, and Jonathan Johnson is up a game over Teener Rhinos. So looking at Hoey's deck, Mason, now we've seen the Rhinos deck a lot in Modern, and this does look pretty similar. We've got a sideboard of 4 Endurance, 4 Fury, 3 Force of Vigor, 2 Inevitable Betrayal, which is the what's that? That's the bribery you can cascade into, yep. And 2 Mystical Dispute. What of that are you looking at here, and what are maybe you looking to change about your deck going into game 2 here if you're Hoey?
Yeah, so I think you're probably going to want some of your Mystical Disputes. Those can be pretty good to fight over, the counter wars or stop a Delver or a Murktide. That can be pretty important. And along that same train of thought, I think we're pretty interested in some number of Endurances just to stop Murktides and Dragon Rage Channelers from sort of getting out of hand. Also going to just block a Delver of Secrets. As for exactly what we're going to side out, I imagine we might see some things like either Fire Ice get trimmed on or Force Negation. Force Negation is fine, but not the best card in the world. And you can sort of upgrade that counterspell to Mystical Dispute, where your cards do sort of matter. We might see him take a totally different direction. The way you want to approach these games is sort of up to you as the Rhinos player.
Yeah, and looking at Jonathan Johnson's sideboard, he's got access to 2 Force Negation, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Surgicals, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Counterbalance, 1 Cast in the Fire, a Brotherhood's End, Hydroblast, Null Rod, and Meltdown. What of that is really interesting to you?
Yeah, when it comes to the Delver sideboard, there's a couple things that sort of stick out. You might be interested in having some number of Force Negation just as a way to sort of fight over the Rhinos on the opposing turn. Counterbalance, not super appealing. The opponent's deck is really mana intensive. The Red Elemental Blast is something that's kind of fine, but it's really just a counter for their counter spells. And personally, I'm against Surgical Extraction, but if you think you can just, resolve, let the first Rhino resolve and then answer all of them, you can beat the rest, you could, but not a direction I typically like to take my deck post-board. Surgical is really a card I want for graveyard cards only. But I think the players are ready for game number 2, so let's hop on down to that.
Yeah, it looks like they are, and they've got hands drawn with Hoey just starting on a Misty Rainforest. Jonathan Johnson gonna, Delver doesn't often do nothing on turn 1. See a Volcanic Island and whatever the follow-up is. I was thinking about Counterbalance. You don't like the counter the balance as Chalice of the Void at home?
I mean, does it work with lands on the 0?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, if it works, I thought it did not. I thought it said reveal a spell. If it works with the 0s, I'm in. I thought it said reveal a spell card, which is, maybe my mistake there. I guess I can read Counterbalance. I have eyes. Chat's telling me I'm right. All right, I'm in for Counterbalance. If it works with the lands, like chat's saying it does. That's just me misremembering the card and not reading it fully. Yeah, so if they play a spell, you reveal the top card. I was thinking about the spell as the top card. That's on me, chat. Sorry about that.
And Jonathan Johnson deciding that his top 3 cards of his library are not the best possible, shuffling that Ponder away. As we see things pass right back to Hoey, who is thinking about what it is he's going to do. His game plan doesn't really start till turn 3, unless he has one of those Spirit Guides that he's got 7 of in his deck to get a turn ahead. Looks like he's thinking a lot about what land to play, though, exposing that Volcanic Island. Johnson's got a Scalding Tarn and a Brainstorm. Still kind of sculpting the hand, not really a fast to the board hand here from Jonathan Johnson, which might be might be really, really good for Hoey, who is not really under any pressure right this second and has the opportunity to take the initiative.
Yeah, we're seeing Hoey sort of size up his turn. This is the big turn, right? Everyone knows these Cascade decks on turn 3, they sort of can take over the game and start doing their thing. And Hoey's deciding, do I just want to tap out and play the Shardless? My opponent clearly has a lot of reactive cards and not much pressure, where they would have developed the pressure while I couldn't do very much.
Yeah, really, really interesting spot from Hoey. You see him fetch. What are you leaning towards, Mason? If you're from Hoey's seat, you can see a little bit of Jonathan's hand here. You might have a little bit of information, but what would be going through your head right now as Hoey?
I think, what does my next couple of turns look like if I start the fight with this Cascader? And I think I do want to start now more than later. It's going to get worse if my opponent has time to develop something. So if I can do this here and force them to fight over this, ideally with a card like Force of Will instead of Daze, as to make them go down on cards. But in general, I think it's a pretty good way to just start the chain of events and just let your other spells start resolving. If you do this as well, it might be a little harder for your opponent to develop multiple threats. Jonathan might just be, kept a hand that was heavy on answers and had some selection spells with that Ponder and Pound a Brainstorm. And now you're like, okay, I can limit Jonathan's mana and make it harder to get a card like Cantrip into Murktide Regent.
Yeah, really limiting the options Johnson has access to by limiting the access to that third mana this turn. Right now forced to cast in that Murktide Regent, but not going to be very large. I think just a 5/5 by my count.
Yeah, bigger than the Rhinos, which is the notable part. Hoey also sort of did this last turn here to set up for this Minsc and Boo Timeless Hero, sort of getting a fight over that. Now, we might see, because this has hit the battlefield, a Brazen Borrower actually enter this Murktide and try and strain it in Jonathan's hand. Or to see how Hoey prioritizes whether getting his threat or getting this large Murktide off the battlefield.
Yeah, it's really interesting how Hoey was able to use that call, use the Rhinos to set up a position where Johnson doesn't have, all of his counter magic. He's able to pinch that mana, and now Johnson's the one tapped out into Hoey's hand, which is actually pretty reactive, right? We've got the Endurance, we've got the Brazen Borrower, and we're making Johnson now have these Force Wills, right? Take these exchanges, make the game about just this one thing. And that Minsc and Boo, one of the most powerful cards in Legacy, sitting in his hand. What do you think? What do you think Johnson's plan here is? How much do you think he has to prioritize this Murktide Regent?
He just prioritizes it a lot. Not only is this something that can answer the large Rhinos from the opponent's side, it is also just his best clock to victory. This card is one you want to fight over, you want to protect. Now, it getting fogged for a turn, something like Fire Ice, is something you should be pretty okay with, I think. But in general, it is just we need to make sure it stays on the battlefield. And if it gets unsummoned and with the potential to protect it, we'd much rather have the ability to replay it immediately. And currently our graveyard mana situation wasn't that way, so we weren't down with Brazen Borrower or unsummoning it. Had we had more cards in the graveyard, we might have actually let that Brazen Borrower resolve and just be like, whatever, I'm going to redeploy this and save my Force of Will for something like this Minsc and Boo Timeless Hero. As it does look like that Spell Pierce is going to be cast on the Minsc and Boo.
Yeah, Hoey fetching in response. I'm not sure what we've got here, but how important is this Minsc and Boo?
It is very important. As we're going to see a fetch and an Elvish Spirit Guide to pay for the Spell Pierce. Minsc and Boo is one of the strongest planeswalkers of all time. Now, if we want to pull up Minsc and Boo, we can talk about it here real quick in case you haven't seen this new hitter. Basically, it can make this our little friend Boo and grow Boo's size so you can start racing, and then you can sacrifice Boo in order to fling and deal X damage to target player and draw that many cards. So we are going to attack.
Yeah, so now we're in the racing situation, and Hoey's actually the first one to have a big attack, right? And that's pretty big.
Hoey admiring the token art. Sorry to interrupt you.
I mean, Boo is just a cute hamster, right?
True.
But so if you're Johnson, how important is the Minsc and Boo, right? Is it everything? Is it nothing? Is this Murktide? You're going to go down to 5 here if you can't make a blocker.
Oh, well, second Murktide makes it a lot easier. So now both Murktides are going to grow. The second one does see the exiling from the first one. The second one's cast. And now we can kill this Minsc and Boo and set up for, 2 turns attacks with lethal, or, set up for over the course of 3. bunch of different options available there. And Hoey, unfortunately, just didn't have time to develop that endurance that he sideboarded in to keep these Murktides off the battlefield, and does have some chump blockers for the dragons now, but looks like Hoey's going to try and trick Jonathan and have a little flash threat and then attack in for lethal.
Yeah, it looks like Hoey opting to just take the full damage, let Johnson, you know, spend his mana, dig his own grave, looking maybe to flash in the endurance in hand. That's what, 5, 9. Got Johnson a 2, maybe a Fire Ice, maybe another Minskin Boo.
A little violent outburst, maybe.
Maybe.
This Delver, actually a huge draw there for Jonathan. It's going to make finding any sort of out a lot harder. Hoey might be able to do something like ice into a pump spell. It does look like we're going to Brazen Borrower to bounce the Boo token.
Oh, wow. So we're going to be forced to spend this Force Negation here from Hoey. So what's the ideal draw step? What are we looking at?
I think it has to be something like ice into the Violent Outburst. I believe that's the out. Now, we might draw another Minskin Boo, and we can maybe grow our Boo. That's going to be really close. Looks like Hoey's moving to attacks. A Violent Outburst. Oh, and it would have had it, but Jonathan Johnson able to win there. We're going to head on back to the booth here real quick, and an incredibly well-played game from both players there, but the Delver deck sort of just having just enough and doing its thing to keep the Rhino player from doing what they wanted to.
Yeah, I think it was really cool seeing that match, just how, you know, people talked about when the Blue-Red Murktide deck in Modern came around as, oh, it's Delver from Legacy in Modern, and now seeing Rhinos as the, oh, it's Rhinos in Modern in Legacy. Seeing how that really is kind of the same in a lot of those ways, you know, posturing over how you're spending the mana in the end step there. Really just a great match highlighting how same things can be while also how different.
100%. Well, speaking of highlighting, we're going to go give our players a little bit of a break. We're going to be back, though, in a couple minutes. The round's almost over. So click that follow button and wait here. We're going to show you some best of NRG, I believe. So we're going to have some more magic available for you. But we'll be back with some more live magic in just a couple minutes.